She looked at me through the cracked helmet. "Why did you save me, human?" The planet was silent, but the silence felt heavy, like it was waiting for something. Evan stepped carefully over the twisted metal and blackened rocks, his boots crunching softly against the debris. The sky was a dull gray, with smog hanging low and drifting in slow, lazy clouds. Smoke rose from distant fires, burning craters like old wounds in the landscape. It had been months since the war started here, and the battlefield stretched endlessly, littered with the remains of ships, vehicles, and machines from both humans and alien forces. The air smelled of scorched metal and ozone, but Evan barely noticed. He had grown used to it. Survival required focus. He had been scavenging for days, moving quietly, keeping his head down. Humans were few on this planet, most had either fled or been killed. But Evan had a reason to stay. The planet was rumored to have hidden caches of old technology, some of it dangerous, some of it valuable. He needed supplies, yes, but he also needed answers. He needed to understand why the war had come so suddenly, why humans had been pushed to the edge, and why the aliens, with all their strength and advanced weapons, still hesitated in some parts of the battlefield. As he moved along the cratered terrain, he kept his hand on the small plasma pistol at his side. His eyes scanned constantly, watching for movement, listening for sounds. He had learned to trust his instincts. They had saved his life more than once. Then he heard it, a faint groan, almost lost in the wind and the distant rumble of explosions. He froze, heart thumping. The sound was human-like, yet it wasn't human. That made sense. This was a battlefield for aliens too. If someone or something was alive here, it could be friend or foe, and either way it could be dangerous. Evan crouched behind a jagged metal plate, squinting at the source of the sound. There, under the wreckage of a large alien transport, was a figure struggling. The alien's armor was cracked, dented, and smoking from the fire nearby. Its helmet was partially shattered, revealing a faint glimpse of pale skin, sharp features, and wide, terrified eyes. The alien was trapped, pinned beneath the heavy wreckage. Its breathing was shallow and irregular, and Evan could see the weakness in every movement it made. He hesitated. His mind screamed caution. This could be a trap. The alien could be bait for patrols, or worse, it could be a fighter ready to attack the first human who came near. Yet something inside him refused to walk away. He had seen too much death already. He had lost friends to this war, to ambushes and betrayals, to blind hatred. And he had promised himself that he would never let life die if he could prevent it. Evan moved carefully, placing his hand on the wreckage. It was hot from the fires that had burned it, but he ignored the heat, using all his strength to lift a part of the twisted metal. The alien gasped, a sound of pain and surprise. It had been expecting death, not mercy. Evan gritted his teeth, straining under the weight. Another piece of metal fell aside, and he could finally see more of the alien's face. Her eyes, wide and green, locked on him. She didn't speak, only stared, as if trying to understand why a human would risk his life for her. Finally, with one last effort, Evan rolled the wreckage off her. She stumbled, barely able to stand, and collapsed against his shoulder. She was lighter than he expected, but still weak. Her armor hung in pieces around her, and the helmet barely stayed on her head, cracked and charred. Evan helped her to a safer spot behind a ridge, where the wind was lighter and he could breathe without choking on smoke. "Why did you save me?" she whispered, her voice hoarse, almost a whisper against the roar of the distant fires. Evan blinked, taken aback. Her words were strange, yes, but the question itself cut through all the tension. Why had he saved her? He could have left her there. Many humans had. He thought about it for a moment. "Because I can," he said finally. "Because no one deserves to die if I can stop it. You're alive now, that's enough reason." The alien stared at him, confusion and suspicion flickering in her eyes. Her hand trembled as she tried to adjust the cracked helmet. Evan could see the faint scars on her face, the dark circles under her eyes, the exhaustion in her body. She had been through hell, and yet she was still alive. He didn't know her name yet, and that didn't matter. Right now, survival mattered. He helped her lie down carefully on a flat patch of ground, checking her wounds as best he could. She had burns from the wreckage, cuts across her arms, and her breathing was shallow, but she was alive. He rummaged through his small pack and found a med kit. The supplies were limited, but he cleaned her wounds as best he could, bandaged the cuts, and applied a cooling gel to the burns. All the while, she watched him silently, still too weak to speak, but her eyes following every movement. Hours passed. Evan kept watch while she rested, listening to the wind, watching for patrols, drones, or predators. He had grown used to this kind of vigilance. It had become second nature. He didn't sleep much, but his body could function on minimal rest when necessary. The alien shifted slightly, then turned her head toward him, her cracked helmet revealing her eyes more clearly now. They were intelligent eyes filled with questions, filled with life. "Your people, you could have left me," she said again, voice still weak. "But you didn't. Why?" Evan shrugged, leaning back against a rock. He didn't need to sugarcoat it. "I don't like seeing someone die if I can help. Doesn't matter if they're human, alien, or anything else. Life is life. You're alive now, that's enough for me." The alien seemed to study him for a long time. She didn't speak, only blinked slowly, as if trying to understand a concept her people might not even have words for. Finally, she gave a small nod. It was not trust, not yet, but it was acknowledgement. The night deepened and the battlefield grew darker. Fires burned in the distance, but here, behind the ridge, there was silence, a small pocket of safety. Evan kept watch while she rested, feeling the weight of responsibility. Saving her had been risky, but it was the right thing to do. That alone mattered. As dawn approached, the alien stirred. Her movements were slow but determined. She sat up, touching the cracks in her helmet. Evan handed her a water container and she drank carefully, watching him the whole time. "My name is Lyra," she said finally, her voice steadier now. "I am a soldier. You saved a soldier." Evan nodded. "And I am human. My name is Evan. Soldier or not, life is life. I couldn't leave you to die." Lyra looked at him, the cracked helmet revealing her face more clearly in the soft morning light. She still didn't fully understand him, didn't fully trust him, but something in her expression changed. Something that had been hardened by war, by duty, by orders was softening. "You are different from the others," she said. Her voice was quiet, but there was curiosity in it. "Your people, they do not always fight, even when they could. Why?" Evan smiled faintly, looking around at the desolate landscape. "Because fighting isn't the only way to survive. Some of us still know how to help. Some of us still care." Lyra considered this. She had seen many humans, some cruel, some brave, but none like this. One moment could change everything. One choice, one act of mercy could ripple far beyond understanding. And this human Evan had made that choice without hesitation. "Then we must move," Evan said after a while. "Staying here is dangerous. Patrols could come at any moment. I know a place, a hidden cave not far from here. You can rest, heal properly there, but we have to leave now." Lyra looked at him, still cautious but willing to trust him for now. She rose slowly, wincing as pain shot through her body. Evan steadied her, supporting her as they started moving. Each step was painful for her, but she kept going. Together, they moved through the ruins of the battlefield, the smoke and ash drifting around them like ghosts of war. As they walked, Evan noticed small things about her, the precision in her movements, the awareness in her eyes, the way she scanned the environment even while injured. She was a trained soldier, no doubt about it. And yet she had just experienced something humans rarely got to see, mercy from an enemy. That would change her. He hoped it would change her. Hours passed. They reached the cave just as the sun was rising, painting the sky in orange and purple streaks. Evan helped Lyra inside, making a small, safe corner for her to rest. She lay down, exhaustion taking over, but she watched him still. "Why do you help?" she asked once more, her voice softer now. Evan sat down near the entrance, keeping watch. "Because someone has to. Someone has to show that life matters, even in a place like this. That someone can be human." Lyra's eyes closed slowly, not in sleep, but in thought. Perhaps she didn't fully understand yet. Perhaps she never would completely. But one thing was clear. The cracks in her helmet were more than just physical. They were symbolic. And the human in front of her, Evan, had just started to mend something deeper than metal or armor. The wind howled outside the cave, but inside, for a moment, there was calm. Life had been saved. That was all that mattered. And for the first time in months, Evan felt a quiet satisfaction. He had faced danger, risked everything, and done the right thing. And in return, he had found a spark of something he hadn't expected: connection, understanding, and perhaps a chance for something greater than survival. The war was still raging outside, and danger would come again. But here in this cave, Evan and Lyra had shared something rare, a moment of humanity in the midst of chaos. And it would be enough to carry them forward, step by step, into the uncertain days ahead. Evan watched Lyra as she rested, her breathing slow but steady. The cave was small but safe, tucked between jagged rocks that hid it from view. Outside, the distant rumble of explosions reminded him that the battlefield was never far, but inside, for the moment, there was peace. He had gathered some water and small rations from his pack and handed them to her. She drank carefully, still wary of every movement he made. I do not understand your kind, she said after a long pause. Her voice was soft, almost fragile. Humans, you could have left me to die, but you did not. Why? Evan shrugged lightly, sitting on a rock and keeping his pistol close just in case. Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply. I don't leave someone to die if I can stop it. Doesn't matter who they are. Human, alien, soldier, civilian, life is life. Lyra's eyes narrowed slightly. She had heard many speeches, many excuses, many lies during the war. Few words had ever sounded as simple and honest as these. For a moment she studied him as if searching for some hidden meaning, some trick, but there was none. Evan was just human, acting like a human should. I have never seen such compassion, she said finally. Not from my people, not from anyone. Evan gave a small smile. Maybe it's because someone has to show it. Maybe it's because life is worth saving. Lyra seemed to consider that. The crack in her helmet was still visible, a jagged line running across the metal, but it no longer seemed as threatening. It was almost vulnerable like her. For a soldier, vulnerability was dangerous, but Evan didn't act afraid. That was something she could not yet understand. Then we must move, Evan said after a few minutes of silence. Staying here is dangerous. Patrols could come at any moment. I know a place not far from here. A hidden cave where you can heal properly, but we need to leave now. Lyra's body stiffened. She tried to rise on her own, but her legs trembled and she winced. Evan stepped forward immediately, placing a firm hand on her shoulder. I've got you, he said. Take my arm. With his support, she slowly stood, leaning on him as they stepped out of the cave. The landscape stretched before them, burned earth, broken machinery, and smoke rising from the wreckage of the war. Every step was painful for Lyra, but she refused to fall back. Evan adjusted his pace, moving slowly so as not to strain her further. As they walked, they passed the skeleton of a destroyed alien walker. Evan pointed toward it. See that? This war leaves nothing untouched. People, machines, land, everything burns, but we keep going. That's the point, survival. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes filled with something between curiosity and disbelief. Your people do not fear death, she asked. Evan laughed quietly, a dry sound. Of course we do, but fear does not stop us. It drives us to survive. We fight, we hide, we move forward. That's all anyone can do. The alien said nothing, but her gaze lingered on him. She was learning, slowly, that human survival was more than instinct. It was determination, ingenuity, and courage. Something that her people often underestimated. They moved for hours, navigating through burned-out vehicles and craters filled with water and debris. Evan kept watch, alert to every movement, every shadow. He was aware that enemy patrols were in the area, and he didn't trust that a soldier, even an injured one, could protect herself fully. He also knew that staying together increased their chances of survival. Alone, they were vulnerable. Together, they had a chance. As night began to fall, Evan spotted movement in the distance. Alien drones, small and sleek, hovered above the ruined landscape, scanning for survivors. He crouched low, motioning for Lyra to do the same. Her eyes were sharp, trained for combat, even though her body ached from injury. She followed his instructions without hesitation. They see us, Evan whispered. We need to move fast or they'll catch us. Lyra nodded, though her voice was weak. Lead the way. They dashed through the rocky terrain, Evan guiding her around obstacles, dodging low-flying drones, and using shadows for cover. At one point, a drone scanned their position, its sensors glowing red, but Evan threw a small rock to distract it. The machine shifted, giving them enough time to move to safety behind a jagged outcrop. You think too much, Lyra said between breaths, a hint of amusement in her voice despite the situation. Humans clever, Evan chuckled. Clever enough to survive. They continued moving under the cover of darkness. Evan found a small stream running through the terrain and motioned for Lyra to drink and rest for a few minutes. She knelt by the water, her cracked helmet reflecting the faint moonlight. For a moment she looked almost fragile, a stark contrast to the warrior he knew from before. You could leave me, she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. But you stay. I stay, Evan replied simply. You need help, I can give it, that's enough reason. Lyra considered his words. Her people were trained to distrust outsiders, to see mercy as weakness. But this human, this one individual, had proven otherwise. He was alive, unafraid, willing to help an enemy without hesitation. It was a lesson she could not ignore. The night passed slowly. Evan kept watch, taking shifts with himself, barely resting. Every sound made him alert, small movements in the grass, distant explosions, the wind rustling across broken metal. He was prepared for attack, but none came. Lyra slept fitfully, her body still in pain, but alive. That was enough. By morning, the sun was rising, casting soft light across the desolate landscape. Evan and Lyra resumed their journey. The terrain was difficult, with craters and debris slowing their progress, but Evan moved carefully, helping her over obstacles, supporting her when she faltered. Along the way, Lyra began to talk more cautiously. She asked about humans, about Earth, about the war, about why Evan had chosen to help her. He answered honestly, telling her about human resilience, human courage, and the belief that life mattered, even in the midst of chaos. "You are different from the others," she said at one point, eyes studying him. "I have fought many humans, most kill without hesitation. You save." Evan smiled faintly. "Not all of us are the same. Some of us still know how to care. That's why I saved you." Lyra was quiet for a moment, thinking. The cracks in her helmet caught the sunlight, casting fractured patterns across her face. It was a symbol of her injury, but also of something deeper, her vulnerability, her humanity, and her ability to change. Eventually, they reached a ridge overlooking a valley. From there, Evan pointed to a distant cave, partially hidden by rocks and overgrown vegetation. "There, that's where we can rest properly. It's hidden. Patrols rarely come near it. We'll be safe there for now." Lyra looked at the cave and then back at him. "You trust me enough to bring me there?" Evan shrugged. "I trust you enough to survive together. That's what matters." They made their way to the cave carefully, avoiding open spaces and moving quietly. Once inside, Evan inspected the area, making sure there were no signs of enemies. He found a flat area for Lyra to lie down and set up a small fire for warmth. She sat beside it, her hands still trembling slightly from pain and exhaustion. "You are patient," Lyra said, her voice soft. "And careful, my people. They would have left me to die for fear of danger. You do not fear danger?" Evan shook his head. "I do fear it, but fear is nothing if it stops you from helping. I act despite fear, not because I don't feel it." Lyra was silent for a long moment. She could not fully understand him, not yet. But she felt it, the truth in his words, the strength in his actions. In a world where war had taught her to kill, Evan had taught her to survive and to trust. That night, Evan kept watch at the cave entrance while Lyra rested. He thought about the war, about the countless lives lost, and about the small victories that kept hope alive. Saving Lyra had been dangerous, but it was worth it. Her life was proof that humanity, his humanity, still had value, even in a world torn apart by conflict. Lyra woke once during the night, shifting slightly, and looked at him. "I understand," she said quietly. "I think I understand why you saved me. Not everyone thinks as you do." Evan nodded. "Not everyone does, but some of us do, and that's enough to change things one step at a time." By morning, both were ready to continue. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in months, Lyra felt something new: trust, curiosity, and perhaps a flicker of hope. Evan had shown her that life mattered, that even in a place of destruction, compassion could survive. And with that thought, they stepped out of the cave together, ready to face whatever the battlefield had in store next. The morning light was pale as Evan and Lyra left the safety of the cave. The battlefield stretched out before them like a scarred landscape, littered with broken ships and blackened craters. Smoke drifted in thin streams, the remnants of fires that had burned overnight. The silence between them was comfortable. Neither needed to speak much. Their steps, their glances, and their instincts communicated everything necessary. Lyra was moving more steadily now, though her steps were cautious. Her armor had been patched as best Evan could manage, and her energy was slowly returning. She observed the world with sharp eyes, noting every detail: the shape of rocks, the patterns in the smoke, the tracks left by creatures and patrols. Every step reminded her of the fragility of life. She had lived for combat, for orders, for duty. But she had not lived for trust or hope, until now. "Do you know where we are going?" she asked, her voice quieter than the wind. Evan shook his head. "Not exactly. There's a settlement rumored to be safe, a place neutral to both humans and aliens. It's far, but we can make it if we move carefully." Lyra considered that. "Neutral? I have not seen a neutral place since this war began." Evan gave a small smile. Me neither, but it's out there. We just have to survive until we find it. Their journey led them across a barren valley. Craters dotted the ground, filled with stagnant water that smelled of chemicals. Broken war machines lay scattered, some smoldering, some silent forever. Evan led Lyra along a path that kept them hidden in shadows, moving slowly and deliberately to avoid patrols. His instincts guided him, his eyes scanning constantly for danger. At one point, a low growl echoed across the valley. Evan froze, motioning for Lyra to stay behind a rock. The sound came again, closer now, and two large creatures emerged from the smoke. They were mutated, perhaps a side effect of chemical weapons with glowing eyes and jagged claws. Evan pulled out his pistol, aiming carefully. "Stay behind me," he whispered. Lyra nodded, gripping her own weapon, a small plasma blade she had salvaged from her damaged armor. Her hands were steady now, her body responding instinctively despite her weakness. Together, they prepared for the creatures. The first creature lunged, its claws slashing through the air. Evan fired, the plasma bolt striking it in the chest, but it did not fall. Lyra leapt forward, striking the creature with her blade. Sparks flew as the metal and energy collided. Evan fired again, and this time the creature collapsed, twitching. The second creature hesitated, assessing the humans. Evan and Lyra moved in unison, keeping their distance and forcing the creature toward a small chasm. With careful coordination, they managed to drive it over the edge, where it fell with a deafening crash. Breathing heavily, Evan lowered his weapon. Lyra's chest rose and fell rapidly, but her eyes were alive with the thrill of survival. She looked at Evan, a faint smile crossing her lips. "You are clever," she said. "You're kind, more clever than I thought," Evan chuckled. "Clever enough to survive, that's all that matters." They continued moving, the terrain growing more treacherous as they approached a ridge that overlooked a dense forest. The trees were blackened, but they provided cover, a chance to move without being seen. Evan led Lyra down into the forest, careful to avoid unstable ground and the remnants of traps left by both humans and aliens. As they walked, Lyra began to speak more freely. "I have seen many humans," she said. "Most fight, most kill, but you save. Why?" Evan thought for a moment. "Because someone has to show that life matters even when everything else is chaos. Humans are not all the same, just as aliens are not all the same. Some of us fight, some of us help. I choose to help when I can." Lyra nodded slowly. The concept was foreign to her, but she understood it through his actions. Saving her had been dangerous, yet Evan had done it without hesitation. That single act spoke more than words ever could. The forest grew denser, and the sounds of the battlefield faded into the distance. For the first time in days, there was a sense of quiet, almost peace. Evan allowed himself a brief moment to breathe, but he did not relax completely. Danger could come from anywhere: enemy patrols, wild creatures, unstable ground. Hours passed. They found a small stream where Lyra could drink and rest. Evan knelt beside her, checking her wounds and cleaning the dirt from her armor. She watched him closely, her green eyes reflecting the sunlight. "You trust me," she said finally. "After everything, you trust me." Evan looked at her, a serious expression on his face. "I trust you enough to survive together, that's all that matters." Lyra considered that. Trust was rare in her life. She had been trained to follow orders, to doubt everyone, to survive alone. Yet here was a human, risking everything for her, expecting nothing in return. It was unfamiliar but not unwelcome. As evening approached, they spotted movement in the distance. A group of enemy drones was patrolling the area, scanning for survivors. Evan crouched low, motioning for Lyra to do the same. "They see us," he whispered. "We need to move fast." Lyra's hands went to her weapons, her body tense but ready. Evan led her through the shadows, using fallen trees and rocks for cover. The drones moved with precision, their sensors scanning for heat and motion. One came close, its glowing eye sweeping past them. Evan held his breath, counting seconds, then threw a small rock to distract it. The drone turned, giving them a chance to slip past unnoticed. "That was clever," Lyra whispered, impressed despite herself. "Clever enough to survive," Evan replied, his trademark line bringing a small smile to her lips. They pressed on, moving deeper into the forest as night fell. The shadows became longer, the sounds of distant battles replaced by the quiet rustling of leaves. Evan kept a careful watch, alert for predators or patrols. Lyra followed closely, her movements becoming more fluid, more coordinated with his. They were no longer just two survivors. They were a team relying on each other for survival. Around midnight, they found a small clearing. Evan decided it was safe enough to rest briefly. He set up a small fire, its light flickering and casting long shadows. Lyra sat beside it, her hands still trembling slightly from exhaustion, but her eyes were bright, alert. "You are patient," she said softly, "and careful, my people, they would have left me. You do not fear danger?" Evan shook his head. "I do fear it. But fear is nothing if it stops you from helping. I act despite fear, not because I don't feel it." Lyra was quiet for a long moment. She could not fully understand him, not yet. But she felt it, the truth in his words, the strength in his actions. In a world where war had taught her to kill, Evan had taught her to survive and to trust. The night passed slowly. Evan kept watch while Lyra rested. Every sound made him alert, but none were threats. He thought about the journey ahead, about the humans who had fought and died, about the aliens who had fought and died, and about the small victories that made survival possible. Saving Lyra had been risky, but it was worth it. Her life was proof that humanity, his humanity, still had value even in a world torn apart by conflict. By dawn, both were ready to continue. The forest stretched out before them, still dangerous but offering hope. Evan and Lyra moved carefully, relying on each other's instincts and skills. The bond between them had grown stronger, forged in survival, trust, and the quiet understanding that life mattered above all else. Hours later, they reached the edge of the forest and looked out over a wide valley. In the distance, smoke rose from a settlement, small, fortified, and seemingly neutral. Evan squinted through the rising sun. "There," he said, "that's our next stop. If the rumors are true, we can rest properly there and find supplies." Lyra studied the settlement. "Neutral, I hope it is as you say. Otherwise, it could be another trap." Evan nodded. "We'll find out soon enough, be ready for anything, but for now, let's keep moving." Every step counts. The journey through the valley was long and arduous. Enemy drones patrolled the area, and they had to move with care. Evan led Lyra along hidden paths, using the terrain to their advantage. When one patrol came too close, he and Lyra crouched in tall grass, holding their breath as the machines passed. It was a tense, silent dance, but they moved efficiently, silently, like shadows in the light of dawn. By evening, they had reached the outskirts of the settlement. It was quiet, too quiet, and Evan's instincts warned him to be careful. He motioned for Lyra to stay behind a wall as he scouted ahead. He saw movement inside, guards, weapons, and signs of activity, but also signs of neutrality. People were moving about without aggression, trading goods, repairing equipment. It seemed safe for now. Evan returned to Lyra and nodded. "It's safe, for now. Let's get inside and find a place to rest." Together, they entered the settlement, careful and alert. The journey had been long, dangerous, and exhausting, but they had survived. And in surviving, they had forged a bond stronger than either of them had expected. A bond built on trust, courage, and the simple but powerful act of saving a life. The settlement looked safe, but Evan knew better than to trust appearances. The walls were high, made of scavenged metal and stone, and guards patrolled the perimeter. Inside, people moved about quietly, repairing machinery, trading supplies, and tending to minor injuries. From a distance, it seemed neutral, almost peaceful. Yet Evan's instincts told him that danger was never far and trust had to be earned, not assumed. He turned to Lyra, who was watching the activity with sharp, wary eyes. "Stay close," he said quietly. "We don't know who is friendly yet. Appearances can be deceiving." Lyra nodded. She had learned to rely on his judgment, even if she didn't fully understand it. His survival skills were exceptional, and his courage had saved her life more than once. She followed silently as he led them through a narrow entrance, keeping to the shadows. Inside, the settlement felt strangely calm. People moved with purpose, but there was no obvious aggression. Vendors sold food, water, and small weapons. Technicians repaired damaged equipment, and a few children ran past, laughing in the rare safety they felt. Evan's eyes scanned constantly, noting every detail. Something about this place felt off. As they moved deeper, a figure approached them, a tall human wearing a patched uniform with a symbol Evan didn't recognize. "Halt," the figure said, his voice firm but not hostile. "You two are strangers. State your business." Evan raised his hands slowly. "We mean no harm. We are just passing through. We need shelter and supplies." The man studied them carefully. He glanced at Lyra, then back at Evan. "You brought an alien here?" he asked, suspicion heavy in his tone. Yes, Evan said. She is injured. I am helping her, that is all. The man's eyes narrowed. Follow me. You will be held until we can verify your story. Evan exchanged a glance with Lyra. We don't have a choice, he whispered. Stay calm. They were led to a small enclosure near the center of the settlement. It was simple, clean, but clearly meant to hold prisoners temporarily. Lyra's eyes flickered with anger and mistrust. You trust him? She asked quietly. Evan shook his head. Not yet, but we will survive this together. Inside the enclosure, they were left alone for a few minutes. Lyra's eyes studied Evan. Do you think this is a trap? Probably, Evan replied honestly. We have to be ready, always be ready. They heard footsteps approaching. A small group of humans and aliens entered, led by the man who had first spoken to them. He carried a device that scanned for life signs and armor integrity. Lyra tensed, her hand hovering near her weapon. Evan stepped in front of her, protective. Your alien companion is unique, the man said. We have use for someone like her. We can heal her, but she will need to cooperate. Your cooperation will be noted as well. Evan's jaw tightened. We do not negotiate with threats. We came here for shelter, not for captivity. The man smiled faintly. Shelter is not free, nothing is. You will decide quickly whether you obey or you face consequences. Lyra's eyes widened. She had faced enemies before, but she had never encountered humans like this. They were organized, methodical, and ruthless when necessary. Yet she also noticed something in Evan: steadfastness, calm determination, and a refusal to yield to fear. Evan assessed the situation quickly. We will cooperate for now, he said. But any attempt to harm her or me, and you will regret it. The man nodded slowly, seemingly satisfied with the answer. Very well, you will remain under supervision until further notice. Follow the rules and you will not be harmed. Days passed. Evan and Lyra were confined to a small area within the settlement. They were given food and water, and Lyra's injuries were treated by a team of medics. Slowly, she regained strength. Despite the restrictions, she observed the settlement carefully, noting the structure, the people, and the patterns of movement. Evan remained vigilant, studying the guards, listening to conversations, and searching for any sign of betrayal. One evening, as they sat in the small enclosure, Lyra spoke quietly. I do not trust them, she said. They may appear neutral, but humans, some are cunning. We must be careful. Evan nodded. I know, I feel the same, but we have an opportunity here. We can learn more, gather information, and plan our next move. Patience is key. Lyra considered this. Patience was not easy for a warrior trained to act, strike, and survive immediately. But she had learned that Evan's patience had saved her life once already. Perhaps it could save them again. The next morning, Evan observed unusual activity in the settlement. A shipment of supplies arrived, guarded heavily. He noticed several armed humans talking in hushed tones, exchanging encrypted messages on small devices. Something about the operation seemed secretive and suspicious. He motioned to Lyra. We need to know what they are planning. Follow my lead, but stay alert. They waited until nightfall. Shadows cloaked their movements as they approached the area where the shipment was stored. Evan and Lyra crouched behind crates, observing. The supplies were not just food and medical equipment. They included weapons, armor, and technology far advanced for the settlement. They are preparing for war, Lyra whispered. This is not neutrality. They plan to exploit the chaos. Evan's jaw tightened. I thought so. We need to expose this or leave before it's too late. As they prepared to move, a guard turned suddenly. Lyra reacted instantly, pushing Evan to the ground and drawing her blade. The guard shouted, alerting others. Within moments, they were surrounded. Going somewhere, the man who had first spoken to them said, stepping forward. I warned you about obedience. Evan stood slowly, hands raised. You cannot control everything. We know what you are planning, and we will not let you harm innocents. The man's eyes hardened. You misunderstand. We protect those who obey. Those who defy suffer the consequences. Lyra stepped forward, her blade gleaming in the dim light. You will not control me or him. Evan nodded, ready for action. We survive together. A tense standoff followed. The guards were armed, but Evan and Lyra were determined. They had survived countless dangers before, and they were not about to surrender now. Suddenly, Evan moved, using the shadows to his advantage. He struck a guard, disarming him, and Lyra followed, using her agility to incapacitate another. Chaos erupted as the remaining guards scrambled. Evan and Lyra fought with precision, relying on coordination and trust built over days of survival. Despite being outnumbered, their teamwork allowed them to gain the upper hand. Lyra's strength and skill complemented Evan's ingenuity and resourcefulness. Together, they created an opening and fled toward the outer walls of the settlement. They ran through narrow alleys and shadowed corridors, avoiding patrols until they reached the forest outside. The night air was cool, and the smell of trees and earth was refreshing. Evan slowed, catching his breath, and glanced at Lyra. "You fought well," he said quietly. Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes still sharp and alert. "You taught me to trust. That makes a difference." Evan nodded. "And you taught me patience and courage. We make a good team." They paused at the edge of the forest, looking back at the settlement. The lights flickered in the distance, and the sounds of the guards grew faint. It was clear that the place was no longer neutral. It was a trap waiting for the unwary. "We cannot stay here," Evan said. "We need to move. There is a safe zone farther ahead beyond the mountains. We can make it if we are careful." Lyra nodded. Her trust in Evan was growing, and she had learned to rely on his instincts. Together, they would survive whatever dangers lay ahead. The journey resumed, moving swiftly through the forest. They avoided open spaces, used natural cover, and communicated with silent gestures. The night was their ally, masking their movements from enemy patrols. As dawn approached, they reached a river that marked the boundary of the forest. The water was cold, but Evan and Lyra waded through, keeping low to avoid detection. On the other side, the terrain opened to rolling hills and distant mountains. Safety, or at least the hope of it, lay ahead. Lyra glanced at Evan. "We survived another day," she said, a hint of relief in her voice. Evan smiled faintly. "One day at a time, that's all we can do, and we survived together." The bond between them had grown stronger through danger, trust, and shared determination. Each step forward was a testament to human ingenuity and courage, and the quiet strength of an alien who had learned to trust. Ahead, the mountains loomed, offering both challenge and hope. Evan and Lyra pressed on, ready to face whatever lay beyond, their hearts and minds united in the struggle for survival. The war continued, but so did their journey. And in that journey, they discovered something more powerful than weapons or numbers: humanity, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged through trust. The mountains stretched ahead, their jagged peaks cutting through the pale morning sky. Evan and Lyra moved steadily, careful with every step. The forest had ended, leaving them in rocky terrain where shadows offered little cover. The settlement behind them was a distant memory, but its betrayal lingered in their minds. The humans there had shown that not all people could be trusted, and the experience had reinforced one simple truth: survival required courage, intelligence, and vigilance. Evan adjusted the strap on his pack and glanced at Lyra. She had regained much of her strength, though the cracks in her armor and her helmet were still reminders of past injuries. "We're close to the safe zone," he said quietly. "I can see the signs. There are old markers here, ancient posts that used to guide travelers." Lyra studied the terrain. "And if this safe zone is not as safe as you hope," Evan shrugged, offering a faint smile, "then we survive anyway. That's what we do." The path became steeper, winding around cliffs and narrow ridges. Evan took the lead, testing each foothold before stepping, while Lyra followed closely. Her combat training had taught her to move with precision, and her recovery from injury allowed her to keep pace. They were silent, each aware of the dangers that could emerge at any moment: predators, rogue drones, or hidden enemy patrols. By midday, they spotted smoke in the distance, rising in thin spirals. Evan raised a hand. "That's it, the safe zone." The settlement was small but fortified, built into a natural valley between the mountains. Structures of stone and reinforced metal dotted the area, with solar panels and wind turbines providing energy. Evan noted the presence of both human and alien inhabitants, coexisting cautiously but peacefully. Signs of cooperation and trade were evident, and most importantly, there were no armed guards acting as overlords. This was the haven they had been searching for. As they approached, a group of humans emerged from behind the buildings, cautiously observing them. Evan raised his hands to show they meant no harm. Lyra's hand rested near her blade, ready but restrained. "Welcome," said a human, stepping forward. "I'm Marcus, leader of this settlement. You look like you've been through a lot. Come inside, we can treat your wounds and offer food and rest." Evan exchanged a glance with Lyra. "We will accept," he said, "but I need information. There is corruption nearby." "I need to know who to trust," Marcus nodded. We have heard rumors. Some settlements are controlled by those who seek power, not peace. If you can provide proof, we will help you." Lyra's eyes met Evan's. "This is the moment," she said quietly. "We can stop the others from hurting more people." Evan nodded. "We survive together." Inside the settlement, they were given food and water, and Lyra finally sat, letting exhaustion wash over her. Evan inspected her armor and helmet, checking for damage and preparing repairs. The settlement had tools and materials, and with Lyra's guidance, they worked efficiently, fixing cracks, realigning joints, and ensuring everything was functional. Over the next day, Evan and Lyra gathered intelligence. They spoke with inhabitants, listened to reports, and pieced together the truth. The settlement they had escaped had been stockpiling weapons and supplies, planning to expand their control over the surrounding territory. Innocents would be forced into loyalty or eliminated. The corruption was widespread and swift action was necessary. Evan formulated a plan. "We cannot attack directly," he said. "They are too many and too well armed, but we can expose them. If we broadcast the truth to the right people, we can stop them without unnecessary bloodshed." Lyra nodded. "I can access their records remotely once we get close enough. My skills are faster than brute force." Together, they prepared for infiltration. They moved under cover of darkness, navigating the mountains and avoiding patrols. Lyra's knowledge of alien technology and Evan's understanding of human strategy complemented each other perfectly. They approached the enemy settlement cautiously, using natural terrain for cover, disabling surveillance devices quietly, and moving silently. When they reached the command center, they were confronted by guards. Lyra acted first, using her agility and precision to incapacitate them silently, while Evan covered the entrance and secured the perimeter. Together, they entered the control room, a space filled with screens, consoles, and communication devices. Lyra quickly accessed the main terminal. Her fingers flew over the controls, bypassing security protocols, downloading records, and preparing a broadcast. Evan kept watch, alert to any approaching threat. The tension was immense, but their coordination and trust allowed them to work efficiently. Finally, Lyra spoke. "It's ready. The broadcast will reach every settlement, human and alien. It will reveal the corruption, the plans for conquest, and the abuse of power." "There will be no room for denial," Evan nodded. "Do it." With a final keystroke, the broadcast went live. Across the region, inhabitants of other settlements received the evidence. Communications channels were filled with outrage, fear, and calls for action. The corrupt settlement could no longer operate in secrecy. Their plans were exposed, their control weakened. The alarms in the settlement blared. Guards rushed to respond, but confusion and distrust spread among them. Evan and Lyra used the chaos to slip away, moving swiftly through the corridors and out into the night. They ran until they reached a ridge overlooking the valley, watching as the first signs of rebellion began. People turned against their oppressors, refusing to follow orders, reclaiming freedom and safety. Lyra exhaled deeply, her body trembling from adrenaline and exhaustion. "It worked," she whispered. "The people, they see the truth." Evan smiled faintly. "It always takes courage to show truth, and courage is not limited to humans, but humanity, it does inspire hope." Lyra studied him, her green eyes reflecting both admiration and gratitude. "I see now why you saved me. You do not act for power or glory. You act because it is right. That is something my people rarely understand." Evan looked at the distant settlement where the chaos was beginning to restore balance. "It is not about understanding. It is about choosing to act when others would hesitate. It is about protecting life, even when it is risky. That is what humans do. That is what I do." The next days were spent assisting the safe settlement. Evan and Lyra helped reinforce defenses, teach strategies, and repair technology. Lyra shared her knowledge of alien systems, while Evan taught innovative human techniques to optimize resources and survival. Their partnership was strong, a combination of human ingenuity and alien precision. During a quiet evening, Lyra removed her helmet completely. The cracks, the scratches, the signs of battle were visible, but so was her strength. She turned to Evan. "I think I understand now. I understand why you saved me. It is not fearlessness. It is something greater: compassion, courage, humanity." Evan smiled. "And you understand that strength comes from more than weapons. It comes from choosing to protect life, even when it is hard, even when it is dangerous." Lyra nodded. For the first time in her life, she felt something beyond orders and survival. a sense of respect, trust, and even hope. The bond between them was no longer about survival alone. It was about the potential for change, for peace, and for understanding between worlds. The war was not over, but a small victory had been won. The corrupt settlement was exposed, its influence crumbling, and people were beginning to reclaim their freedom. Evan and Lyra had survived, not just by skill, but by trust, cooperation, and the courage to act when others hesitated. As the sun rose over the mountains, Evan and Lyra stood together, looking out over the valley. The future was uncertain, but for the first time it felt possible. They had faced betrayal, danger, and overwhelming odds, yet they had triumphed, not through force alone, but through intelligence, compassion, and human ingenuity. Lyra placed her hand on Evan's shoulder. "We have done more than survive. We have made a difference, and perhaps that is what matters most." Evan nodded. "Yes, that is what matters: life, trust, courage, and humanity, even in the darkest places." The wind blew softly across the mountains, carrying the scent of fresh earth and the faint smoke of distant fires. It was a reminder that the world was not perfect, that danger still existed, but also that hope could endure. Evan and Lyra had survived together, and together they would continue to face whatever the universe threw at them. For now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet. The battle had been won, not just against enemies, but against fear and doubt. The bond they shared was unbreakable, forged in trust, courage, and the simple but profound act of choosing to protect life. Evan looked at Lyra, her helmet removed, her scars visible but her eyes alive with determination. "You fought well," he said quietly. Lyra smiled. "So did you, and you saved me. That is something I will never forget." Evan nodded. "Nor I you. Humanity and courage are stronger when shared." As they turned toward the settlement, ready to help rebuild, the first rays of sunlight illuminated the valley. It was a new day, a new chance, and the beginning of a future where trust, courage, and compassion could change the world. One step, one act at a time. They had survived. They had triumphed. And they had proven that even in a universe filled with war, fear, and betrayal, humanity could shine brightest when it chose to protect life, to act with courage, and to trust in the power of connection. Evan and Lyra walked forward together, leaving the past behind, ready to face the challenges ahead. The universe was vast and dangerous, but they were alive. They were strong, and they were human and alien working as one.